Welcome back to Ryan's Shooting Podcast. Today's a little bit different from what we've done in the past. I got a great email a couple of weeks ago from a regular listener who had a number of different questions that cover quite a few different topics under the shooting sports umbrella. And they're all things that I think a lot of us think about as shooters, so I decided to dedicate an episode to going through it and talking about all the things he asked me about. So, here we go. Hi Ryan, thanks again for sharing all the knowledge and your insight and for sending your template of the annual training plan across. You bet, no problem. My annual training plan, as advised by you, is taking shape, and though there are a lot of moving parts to manage at any one time, I'm confident that it will bring results, so thanks a lot again. I've also been applying some of your other learnings with success, so I hope you will keep podcasting. Right now, I'm looking forward to hearing your further thoughts on the mental game, probably my biggest area of opportunity right now that I'm really working on intensely. And so I'd love it if your next podcast on the mental game contained your take on, number 1, maintaining mental stamina and consistency over an extended period of time. How do you train for this? All right, so we'll start here. We'll just go through them one at a time as he brings them up. So, first question, like I just said, maintaining mental stamina and consistency. How do you manage this and train for it? So, it's kind of funny that you asked this because it's actually what I'm working on at the moment and trying my best to get better at, but that doesn't mean I don't have an answer for you. I just recently got back from a trip over to Austria and Germany, and so after day one, I'll give you kind of a short recap of what happened. The men's match is, of course, 60 shots, right? So our rifle 60 shots in an hour and 15 minutes, with 15 minutes before that for sighters. So essentially, by the time you get to the end of the match, you've probably shot about 75 shots or so, not counting any dry fires you've done on top of that. My sighters went pretty well, and my match plan was to take a couple short breaks in position at shot 20 and 40 and maybe just move around a little bit and give my brain kind of a minute to relax before going back to my shooting and getting back in my regular rhythm. Well, my first 20 went really well, and I had a nice, reasonably quick pace and good shots. I took my short break and basically experienced the same thing on the next 20. And after 40 shots, I took my second quick break and I started the last third of my match. The first few shots there were pretty good, but then it started to go downhill a little. My pace got a lot slower and I started taking a lot of extra holds because I realized maybe I wasn't paying attention, or I'd start thinking halfway through a shot, all right, did I load a pellet on this one, or did I forget? And then I'd have to put the gun down and check. Just things like that where I clearly was not on top of things, and my mental endurance was not able to keep up with the demands of shooting through the whole match. So what ended up happening was that I was on a really competitive pace for the first 40 or 45 shots, but then because of my decrease in my mental focus, my last 15 or so weren't quite as good, and I ended up just missing the final. So I evaluated my match, and for those of you who don't know, I have a whole episode up about evaluating match performance that you might want to check out. But anyway, I looked back at what happened and consulted with my coach, and we decided that, yeah, this was probably a mental fatigue or mental endurance problem. So with that in mind, I developed a new plan for the next day, since this was a 2-day match. My plan remained similar, but at 40 shots, I was going to physically get off the line and take 5 minutes or so to totally clear my mind and body, like a total reset. Then I'd get back on the line and finish my last 20 shots totally fresh, basically. At first, I was a little wary of this. I didn't think it would be a great idea because of the time it would take. And normally I'm cutting it kind of close on time in air rifle matches, but then I thought about it and I realized that normally I'm cutting it close because that last third of my match is quite a bit slower and more lethargic than the first 60 to 70% or so. So taking this significant break and coming back fresh might actually enable me to shoot quicker and be more efficient and better than I did based on what I'd been doing before. So what happened the next day was, well, I actually didn't really shoot any better, but I could tell that I was much more mentally consistent throughout the whole match, and my timing stayed the same, and that part was significantly better. So breaks work, use them. Now, in general, assuming you have a fair amount of training time coming up to whatever your next match is, you can train to increase your mental endurance. So break up your training into chunks, maybe like 20-shot chunks. Shoot your 20 shots and then get off the line for 5 or 10 minutes, a while, right? And evaluate the things you did right and how you can improve. Then get back up there and do another 20 shots. If you have time, do 4 or 5 or 6 of those in practice, if you have a few hours. Then, gradually over the course of a few weeks, you can increasingly shorten the amount of time you give yourself as breaks between your chunks. So just shooting tons and tons of shots in a row might work for some people, but I know for me that I just get tired and bored and frustrated doing that. So it can help to break it up, and then, like I said, gradually shorten the amount of time you give yourself for breaks until it more and more closely resembles what you have to do in a match situation. Alright, so the next part of his letter, number 2, is inner monologue. We all have it. What's your tactic here to use it to your advantage? So, for those of you who listen to my Mental Game 101 episodes, you should be able to identify this as a conscious mind issue, right? And by inner monologue, I'm assuming he means like the random thoughts that just pass through our mind as opposed to our usual mental program that we plan for. This is an issue everyone struggles with, but you can get a lot better at dealing with it. And to answer your question more directly, I wouldn't say that I use my inner monologue as something that helps me. Rather, it's my mental program that is what helps me. So remember back to that conscious mind episode we did. The conscious mind can only focus on one thing at a time. So if I'm disciplined in following my mental program, then in theory, it will be impossible for other thoughts to enter my mind because my mind is already busy thinking about whatever it is that is in my mental program. This isn't foolproof, of course, and stray thoughts do get through, but then it comes down to practicing being disciplined with your thoughts in practice. Don't go into practice and have a lazy mind while you're shooting. As soon as you recognize that you're thinking about something that is unrelated to what you're supposed to be thinking about, force yourself to get back on track to what it is you're supposed to be concentrating on. You can come back to whatever it was you were thinking about after you're done practicing. Having discipline in practice is going to develop the more you do it, and you'll be able to pick up on stray thoughts faster and more efficiently the more often you do this and the more disciplined you are. And of course, this is a skill that will then transfer over to match day as well. Okay, on to number 3. Number 3 is preparing for setbacks. What are your tactics when they happen? So this is what we call contingency planning, and we're eventually going to do a whole show just dedicated to this topic, but the basic rundown here is that you want to plan out what you're going to do if and when things go wrong before you ever get to the match. You should have a plan for what exact steps you're going to take if, for example, your gun breaks, or you accidentally shoot a crossfire, or a miss, or somebody else crossfires on your target, or whatever else happens that you can imagine. In terms of just not so great shooting as a setback, well, that isn't so much under the contingency planning category, as those are normally bigger things. But when you're just not shooting so great, whether or not you can recover depends on, well, I would say most importantly, what your emotional reaction is. Which, by the way, was also an episode we already did, episode 7, to be exact, if you want to check that out. Anyway, so after in priority your emotional reaction, it's going to have to do with how well you know your position and technique, and how well you can identify things that aren't quite right, and that's just something that comes with practice. The more you do, the better you get at it. Okay, the next question was mental match strategy. What's your routine? So that's quite a broad question, and I've laid out the basics of the mental game in, I guess, episodes 7 through 10. But when it comes to what I actually think about when making my match plan as to what I'm going to do mentally, it mostly comes down to, well, making sure I remain as much of an emotionless robot as possible, and then going over what it is that's going to keep me calm and my anxiety low. That, for me, comes from having a good strategic plan. Knowing what I'm going to do under certain wind conditions if I'm shooting outside, knowing what my contingency plans are, having a strategy for timing and rhythm, those types of things. The more exact I can plan out exactly what I'm going to be doing in the match beforehand, then the more calm I'm going to be when the time comes to actually shoot. Then, on the morning of the match, I'm not someone who listens to pump up music or anything, or tries to get all psyched up and feel really competitive and all of that, because what works best for me when it comes to match day is to think of it in terms of I'm going to the range today to shoot my best, as opposed to I'm going to the range today to win a match. Now, I have the self-image that will allow me to win, but I don't need to think about or focus on winning in order to do it. I just need to keep the focus on me and on making good shots. All right, next question. Mental final strategy. What mindset works for you? And there it is, the finals strategy question. And don't worry, there's definitely going to be an entire episode dedicated to this topic, or maybe 2 or 3. I think that for me personally, one of my greatest attributes as a shooter is the ability to shoot consistently decent finals that allow me to frequently end up on top. As long as I can get into the final in qualification, then I can be pretty well assured that I'm going to finish pretty well. Now, in terms of why I think I'm pretty good at finals, well, there's quite a few reasons for that, and we'll get more into it when we do the episode on finals. But my strategy is just a slight twist on my regular match strategy that I just explained in the last question. Basically, do that same process, but add in anticipate the crowd and the announcer. The crowd and the announcer are always going to do the exact same thing for every single final you ever see. They clap and are loud during certain predictable shots and are going to be silent for other ones. And as for the announcer, predict what they're going to say. That way you feel like you're the one in control and not them, and you're never fazed or surprised or confused by what they say. Anyway, those are the main couple points on what I do for finals, and like I said, we're definitely going to do a whole episode on it. Alright, so here's the next part of his email. He says, I am potentially being a little hopeful in asking you about all this, but I'm really stuck on finding some decent resources on these topics. As background, I found that as mainly an air pistol shooter, I have no issue setting myself up for a match and staying relaxed. I use a mix of mindfulness, meditation, and visualization to get in the zone, and after a few dry shots and sighters, I am almost without fail in the zone. This is around 15 sessions back into my shooting, which I've taken up again after a 12-year break, so I'm pretty happy with that part. But after around 25 to 30 shots into the competition, or even a simulated competition, I tend to get too cool and lose focus, only to start shooting some really weird shots that feel normal, but end up in the low 9s or even 8s, and take a few of those shots before I actually notice something's not right, and pull myself up on it. I then take a long time to recompose off the firing line, but I never quite regain the quality of focus from the first half of the shoot. Anyway, I would be grateful if you could share some of your insight here, either through messages or your podcast, or whether you've ever been in this situation before, and what you did to overcome it. I hope I can get this sorted out over time, but any help along the way is worthwhile asking for. Okay, so I am totally with you on this one. Not everybody has to deal with this problem, but some of us do, or have, myself included. So, a parallel to this that you'll sometimes see is shooters perform their best at the biggest matches of the year, and when they go to a smaller local competition or whatever, they don't perform as well, consistently. Most people would look at that and go, what? That doesn't make any sense. Well, it doesn't make sense for some of us, but if you're someone like me, or I guess the guy who wrote me this letter, then most likely you're a pretty laid-back kind of person. And probably the added stress of the match pushes your performance level higher. It heightens your concentration, it heightens your focus, your fine motor control, everything. A little bit of stress is good because it pushes the limits of what you can do and how you can perform. Of course, too much stress can be debilitating and hurt you, But if you're a very relaxed person, that match stress is exactly what you need to perform your best. Case in point, I've never shot as high as my match personal best in either air rifle or small bore in practice as I have in matches. And often, in the smaller matches I shoot, my scores are a little lower than in the bigger matches, at least partially because the intensity level of the match there isn't as high and doesn't push me to perform as well. So, what do we do about this? Well, we need to find a way to artificially increase our personal mental intensity level by small increments. We don't want to sit there and psych ourselves out by telling ourselves how important it is that we shoot well at this match because we want to beat so-and-so, or we want to win, or make the team, or whatever. None of that. We do want to find something, though. So perhaps, for example, if you are a score-oriented person, you get off the line for a minute and go over whatever your score goal is for that match and what you're going to have to do to reach it, or something like that. Maybe go over a performance goal instead. What aspects of your technique that you're focusing on and focusing on performing perfectly at that match. Everybody's different. Another reason that our mental intensity level can decrease is because just like we all have a certain amount of physical endurance, we also have a certain amount of mental endurance. This goes back to answering a previous question in here that this guy had. Shooting is, as we all know, very mentally taxing, right? It takes a lot of concentration and focused thought in order to shoot a whole match. And our mind gets kind of worn down over the course of it. So take breaks. Schedule them into your match, right? And I already went over what I do, so I take a short break in position at 20 shots, and then I get off the line at 40 shots for 5 or 6 minutes or whatever. Just sit in a chair, let your mind relax. You don't have to focus on shooting. And then for the last 20 shots, the last part of the marathon, I can still be all there and be able to maintain my focus and shoot good shots through to the end of my last series because my mental endurance has been maintained. A side moral of this story is to embrace match pressure. Stress is not always bad. If you feel a little nervous before a match, look at it as a good thing because it could mean you're about to shoot an excellent score. Okay, well, that was essentially the end of his email, and I'm really glad he sent it because we're able to cover a lot of different things. And it's always good to answer the real questions people have about their shooting as opposed to me just kind of droning on like a college professor on topics that I think are important. Anyway, I've received other email inquiries before, and I'll try to get around to answering them on here sometime as well. And if you have anything you'd like to ask, just send it to me at olympicshootingpodcasts@gmail.com. Even if I don't end up using it in an actual show, I will certainly respond to you promptly and directly so that you can, get an answer. One final thing, if you have been enjoying my content and would like to make a donation to support me and to support this program, please head over to paypal.me/Ryan's Shooting Podcast, and you'll be able to submit a donation amount of your choosing. Thank you very much to those of you who have already chipped in. I really appreciate your support. Have a nice week, and make sure to check back next week for the next episode.